Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a pretty tough systemic truth about American public education. It's something that kind of sits right beneath the surface. We rarely say it out loud, but honestly, it impacts literally everything about how our kids learn. And that hard truth is this: we just don't trust our teachers. The reading sage actually puts this perfectly. They say, we do not trust teachers. Not really, not systemically, not structurally. And when you look at the last half century, they're spot on. We've basically replaced genuine teacher expertise with institutional distrust. Instead of empowering the actual professionals who work closest with our kids every single day, we've built this massive educational machine, and it's rooted entirely in control, compliance, and top-down authority. It's a system obsessed with scripting, measuring, and micromanaging every little thing. So that brings us to a somewhat uncomfortable but absolutely essential question. Think about it. Teaching, especially at the elementary level, has historically been a female-dominated profession. But on the flip side, educational leadership, policymaking bodies, and those heavy institutional power structures, they've been disproportionately male-dominated. So when a historically female-dominated field is systematically stripped of its autonomy and put under intense surveillance by outside leaders, well, we really have to stop and ask ourselves, is this just bad policy, or is this actually about power? Because the implicit message from decades of reform is loud and clear. It says teachers can't be trusted to make decisions, so outsiders, like consultants or politicians who have never even run a classroom, have to decide for them. To really unpack this crisis and figure out how to get the power back to the classroom, we're going to break this explainer down into 5 quick parts: the architecture of distrust, decades of policy shifts, the 3 core deficits, a go-to-zero solution, and finally, empowering the classroom. Starting right off with part 1, the architecture of distrust. Let's look at how policymakers manage to so fundamentally misunderstand what teaching actually is. The core disconnect here is that we started treating highly complex, relationship-driven classrooms like they're just predictable factory assembly lines. We measure everything, we standardize everything, and we expect teachers to just act as delivery mechanisms for scripted content. But here's the thing, a classroom is not a factory. It's an ecosystem. It's this vibrant, living network of human development, cognition, culture, and connection. No top-down mandate, no matter how well-intentioned it might be, can ever substitute for the real-time judgment of a skilled teacher interacting with a child. By treating these professionals as mere implementers instead of designers, we've basically broken the ecosystem. Moving into part 2, decades of policy shifts. Because, this factory mindset didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was built layer by layer. Getting a handle on the history here is absolutely crucial. Way back in 1975, conservative think tanks like the Heritage Foundation started shaping policy around accountability. While the precursor to the IDEA Act brought in really necessary student protections, but it also packed on new administrative layers. And check out the irony here. A 1983 report called A Nation at Risk, which was actually supposed to reduce administrative burdens, ended up triggering massive standardization. Fast forward to 2001, and No Child Left Behind caused testing and data collection mandates to just absolutely explode. Then in 2004, the IDEA reauthorization added even more complex compliance rules. And by 2009, with Race to the Top, strict adherence to these rigid fidelity models was fully entrenched. So regardless of who was in charge politically over the years, the outcome was exactly the same: a steady, relentless erosion of teacher autonomy. Which brings us to part 3, the 3 core deficits. So what is the actual measurable fallout from all this historical layering? Well, for starters, here's a truly staggering financial reality. Right now, schools are diverting up to 50% of their funding away from the classroom. Just think about that. Half of your local tax dollars are being completely drained by non-instructional administration, pricey external consultants, massive data tracking systems, and this endless cycle of buying new proprietary edtech and published curricula year after year. It's a relentless consumption model, and it's siphoning resources directly away from the kids who actually need them. Breaking it down, this crisis really falls into 3 main buckets. First, you've got financial inefficiency. That's all the consultant dependency and misallocated resources we just talked about. Next is operational failure. We've spent 25 years pouring money into corrective models like RTI and MTSS, but outcomes have stayed totally stagnant because the system cares way more about checking compliance boxes than actual student competence. And then, most tragically, there's the human capital erosion. Teachers are now dealing with this intense surveillance culture. You've got evaluators roaming the halls with their fofo clipboards, enforcing strict compliance rather than just trusting the teacher's pedagogical expertise. All right, Part 4, the go-to zero solution. Right now, we're stuck in this massive feedback loop of fiddling around, finding out, and then using poor outcomes as an excuse for even more control. Fixing it means hitting the structural reset button. This go-to-zero solution is built on 3 really bold strategic steps. Step 1, we have to decisively delayer the bureaucracy. That means firing redundant consultants and cutting out the administrative bloat that just clogs up the pipeline between policy and practice. Step 2, we need to stop wasting money on proprietary systems and start embracing high-quality, free public domain resources like CK Knowledge or Engage New York. And step 3, we can integrate agentic AI. Not as another top-down mandate, mind you, but as a silent administrative assistant that takes over the busy work, finally freeing teachers up to actually teach. And that leads perfectly into our final section, Part 5, Empowering the Classroom, because every cent of that saved capital needs to go directly back to the human beings doing the actual work. By democratizing our resources and stripping away all that administrative bloat, we can finally invest in the things that actually move the needle, namely smaller class sizes. That's a real game changer. It allows for individualized attention and makes the workload so much more manageable. But above all else, we have to start treating teaching as a true profession again. We need to trust teacher expertise and move away from this authoritarian obsession with curriculum fidelity. Look, a teacher who spends 7 hours a day with their students knows exactly what those kids need, way better than a policy written by some consultant hundreds of miles away, right? Bottom line, if we want better outcomes for our kids, we have to make a massive philosophical shift. We have to completely abandon the old paradigm of rigid, top-down control and compliance. Instead, we need to aggressively pivot to a new paradigm, one anchored entirely in professional autonomy, genuine trust, and keeping every single decision totally classroom-centered. I want to share a quote from the reading sage that really hits the nail on the head here. They warn, you cannot standardize your way to inspiration, you cannot mandate your way to mastery, and you cannot build a thriving system by distrusting the very people it depends on. That is absolutely crucial to understand. The reality is simple, but it is incredibly powerful. The quality of an education system is never, ever going to exceed the agency of its teachers. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to chew on. Now that you know the roots of this systemic distrust and why a total structural reset is so urgent, how will you step up to help dismantle the bureaucracy and champion this vital paradigm shift in your own local schools? It's time to stop managing teachers and start trusting them.